Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Yes, hello, I'm Ashley. I like photography, video games, my dog, Indy, and that pretty much sums up my life, to be honest. Work-wise, I'm building with Jack. 44% of freelancers will be stung by a bad client. So I'm building a platform that helps them financially and legally if that happens. In other words, business insurance for freelancers. As is pretty obvious from this slide, I'm speaking about going from idea to execution and beyond. So we'll cover the idea stage, the build process, launching something, and what to expect post-launch as well. Now I have, one of these is mine, yeah. I have built and shipped a lot of projects over the years. They've ranged from SaaS apps to online courses to podcasts. And most of those have failed. And then some have done okay. And then with Jack, I really tried taking everything that I'd learned and getting things right this time, or doing things a bit better. So I want this to be quite a relatable account of building and launching something. I'm not standing here shooting for a £1 billion exit. I don't have funding. I'm just very much in the trenches trying to figure this stuff out. I'm speaking about this stuff from the perspective of a solo founder. I don't have a co-founder. I would love to have had a co-founder, but my understanding is it's a bit like marriage. You can't just point at somebody and say, you look good, you'll do. Or maybe people do that and that's why the divorce rate's so high. But there needs to be like a shared work ethic, aligned vision. And I've just never met somebody who gets as excited about insurance as I do. So I'm a solo founder. I'm bootstrapping. I funded this with money that I've earned doing freelance photography work. So I've been going out at the weekend, shooting weddings, and then using that money to fund the initial design and development costs of building with Jack. And it's a company of one. The goal is to have a small team that I'm building this with, but I'm not quite there yet. So for anything that falls outside of my skill set, I'm working with an amazing team of freelancers. Also, while some of this advice is of course applicable to just building stuff for fun, I'm definitely approaching it more so from the viewpoint of taking an idea and turning it into something a bit more serious. Everything begins with an idea, so this seems like the logical place to start. My idea for With Jack came from a place I think a lot of our ideas come from. You're going about your day-to-day life, and something that you do regularly or something that you see or use regularly, you stop and think, I could do that. I could do that, but so much better. I'd been working in insurance for 8 years before I started thinking about what would eventually become With Jack. And from those 8 years in the industry, I noticed quite a lot of problems. The first was that people don't actually trust their insurance provider, which is kind of nuts if you think about it. We're paying them money every month, yet we don't expect them to do the job that we're paying them to do. Now, even though I've been working in insurance for so long, I am, of course, a consumer. I buy insurance, so I fully understand that train of thought. And just last year, my house got broken into, and I'm not into fancy clothes, as you can tell. I'm not into jewellery. But I do like gadgets. I have a lot of gadgets, and they stole everything. And the very first thing I thought, or the first thing I thought was, did they take my PlayStation? Which they did. They took my PlayStation and all of my games, but they left Final Fantasy 15 for some reason. So the second thing I thought was, great, my insurance provider's going to have some excuse that gets them out of paying this, like, well, you did tweet that you were going on holiday, which I did, to be fair, but to my surprise, they paid for everything, and I felt like they'd went above and beyond what was expected of them. When they hadn't, they'd simply done the job that they exist to do, but my point is 73% of consumers don't trust their insurance provider. Insurers aren't investing money into their technology. Things are getting a bit better now. There's a lot of interesting insurtech startups popping up. I hate that term, but that's what they're called. And there's a lot of rumblings happening in insurance around technology, but 74% of insurance companies see technological innovation as a challenge, yet few are developing their own offerings in-house or partnering up with startups. So just to reframe that for you, most insurers see technology as a challenge but aren't willing to do anything about it. And lastly, shopping for insurance sucks, right? It's a horrible process, be it the user experience or the fact that we know the second we put in an email address or a phone number, we're going to get hounded. It's a very aggressive industry, and 2 out of 3 customers are unhappy with their journey through buying insurance. So these were the problems that I saw, that I felt really passionate about, and I still do. I still get excited by this and wanted to try solving. And from there I thought, well, I'll build a customer-focused insurance company, customer-focused to increase trust, with great design and technology at its core. And that's really where the idea for WithJack came from. It was designed to solve the problems that I was frustrated with in insurance at the time. But what you see when you look at WithJack right now is it's a relatively finished product. I mean, it's a business, it has paying customers, it has monthly revenue. Yet here is where it started. Humble beginnings as a post-it note that I scribbled in December 2013. And to give you an idea of the length of time WithJack existed, just living up here, I didn't actually launch until August 2016. So a pretty big chunk of time between idea and execution. Now why? Why did it take me essentially 2.5 years to build and launch this thing? Well, there are a number of reasons, but the one that I had control over was that I didn't start saying no to all of the other opportunities that were coming my way. I didn't put all of my other ideas and projects in a box to the side and fully commit to building WithJack. WithJack, as you can see, was just one of many things I had going on. It was the one that I was most serious about. It was the one that I wanted to work on long term. But I was still following my curiosity with all of the other ideas I was coming up with. We're developers, we're designers, we're makers. We often come up with new ideas. And our solution is to usually just build something to solve the problem that we're having. And because we have the skill set to be able to execute on our ideas relatively easily, it means that we end up being pulled in all kinds of different directions. And that, otherwise known as shiny object syndrome, is one of the reasons why it took me so long to build and launch WithJack. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I don't think I'm alone with that. I think a lot of us in here are guilty of falling victim to shiny object syndrome. When I tweeted about the excitement of buying yet another new domain for yet another new project, I had 104 retweets, 119 likes, and a flood of replies from people. And I don't get that kind of engagement on Twitter, ever. And I post cute pictures of ginger kittens. So that clearly resonated with people, which you can see from some of the replies. After a while, you realise how much your habit's costing. You let a few go with pangs of regret and doubt, but clutch on to others. Only dulled when you realise 6 months later you've yet to do a thing with them. And that buyer's remorse takes a while to kick in. This person is speaking from bitter experience. So I'm, at one point in my life, guilty of seeing myself in each of those replies. Owner of a bunch of half-baked projects that have never had the commitment that they need to become great projects. Ideas need an extraordinary amount of work behind them to become great. I'm going to say that again because I think it's really important. Ideas need an extraordinary amount of work behind them to become great. And you can, of course, build and launch something giving it 20% of your time and attention, but it's never going to be a great project that reaches its potential. So after kind of juggling all of these things for a period of time and not really getting anywhere, I decided to do, because I couldn't attract higher end wedding photography clients because I wasn't doing it full time. I couldn't ask people to pay me $4,000 to shoot their wedding because I was only doing a handful a year. So I wasn't building up that experience and portfolio. And I wasn't making much progress with Jack because I was distracted with so many other things. So after kind of juggling everything for a period of time and not making significant progress, I decided to do something really uncomfortable. And I culled all of my projects. My SaaS app, my podcast, the workshops I'd organize in Glasgow. Because I realized we all have a limit of time, attention, and focus, and I had to get real about where I was spending mine. So this is what my project list looks like right now. I have With Jack and I have the wedding photography, which has helped fund things while I'm bootstrapping. I really just wanted to start off by encouraging everybody who has a number of different projects on the go to really pick one and to commit to it and give it the resources that it needs to become a great project and cull the rest. Obviously, you don't want to invest too much time and too many resources into building something without first validating it. Idea validation is a really important step, yet it's a step that a lot of us skip. We just want to dive head first into the build process. It turns out it's pretty tricky validating an insurance business. It's the least startup-friendly industry in the world. There's a lot of capital required to get going. There's a lot of red tape because it's a regulated industry. So it's difficult to just test ideas quickly. So part of my validation was quite simply bull-hearted optimism, like genuinely believing, feeling it in my bones that if I show up every day and I do something I enjoy and I provide value to people and I try my very best at it, that eventually I will find some degree of success. And if you're thinking, that does not sound like idea validation, you're right, it isn't. What you really need is people paying you money for it. So like I said, it's pretty tricky validating anything in insurance. But another part of my idea validation was Insurance by Jack, which is what I tend to call my MVP now. So the quickest way for me to get started in insurance with my own business was to sign up as an affiliate for an insurance broker. And what that meant was that I didn't have to go out and find insurers to partner with me. Somebody was just giving me all of the insurance products ready. And I didn't have to be authorized by the Financial Conduct Authority. So skipping those steps meant I could launch something really quickly and start to gauge feedback and see if people felt the same way I did about those frustrations that I shared with you earlier. But this came with a whole host of downsides. The first was that I couldn't create my own customer journey. I couldn't build my own design and tech, which was one of the problems I wanted to solve, right? Was create a better customer journey. So people were coming to what was essentially a landing page, and they were met with a really striking brand that looks completely different to anything else in insurance at the time, and they responded very positively to that. But when they clicked get a quote, they were taken to the third-party insurance broker site, which had no affiliation to my brand, and it left the customer journey very incohesive. It left a lot of users feeling confused and dissatisfied. The second problem was that because I wasn't authorized by the FCA, wasn't allowed access to customer data. So I had no idea who was coming to the site and buying from me. I couldn't tell you what industry they were in, what occupation they had. And I couldn't create that more customer-focused business that I wanted because I had no idea who my customers were. So clearly, this did not solve the problems that I set out to fix. But despite that, People still gave Insurance by Jack their money. People still came to the website and bought insurance. And the reason was because the website, despite falling short in those areas that I just mentioned, it did such a good job at effectively communicating the vision that I had for insurance and the kind of company that I wanted to build. And people liked that. They wanted to support that. They got on board with that. So I knew if I could solve the problems that I set out to fix, that I was potentially onto something. And that's really how I considered my idea validated. None of you will be crazy enough to start up in insurance or financial services, so you won't have all of the red tape that I do. So ask yourself, what is the tiniest version of your idea that you can quickly build and launch to test feedback? I've seen people do this with Twitter polls and surveys, with spreadsheets. That's how Nomadlist started. And they now do 30K monthly recurring revenue. Email lists, that's how the community site Product Hunt started and then evolved. And of course, the classic approach, which is the one that I took, a landing page. But before you invest too much time and too many resources into building something, make sure you can answer these two questions first. Will people pay you money for it? Are people paying you money for it? And can you profitably acquire new customers every month? Josh Pigford from Baremetrics sums idea validation up perfectly. He says, money is the only validator. The key is to pinpoint the problem you're solving and build the solution as quickly as possible. Then you start selling it and see what happens. It's that simple. So this will be the part of the process that a lot of you are familiar with. I used to really romanticize the build process. I used to get quite excited about the thought of locking myself away in my home office, no social interaction, and just furiously coding and building something. But as we all know, building stuff is really hard. So I'm sure that there are various stages of the build process, and I'm sure that they look different for everybody, but I'll share how it looked for me. This is a good idea. I am so going to do this. This is kind of hard. I'm not so sure about this. This totally sucks. I suck. What the hell was I thinking? Does that sound familiar for anybody else? So I'm a big believer that the final 20% of any project is the hardest to complete. It doesn't matter what it is you're building, the final 20% is going to suck. Seth Godin wrote a book about something similar, at least I drew a lot of parallels, called The Dip. The Dip talks about that part of a project where excitement fades and it gets harder and less fun until it hits a low point. Really hard, really not fun. That's the part that most of us quit and walk away, leaving our half-baked projects. So I had a couple of pretty big dips building with Jack that I'd like to share with you. The first dip, as I said, was insurance is a regulated industry. It's not easy to get started in insurance at all, especially as a solo founder bootstrapping. And there are various tiers of regulation too. So what did I need to be able to build my own tech and have a relationship with my customers? It sounds like it should be a pretty simple question to answer, but insurance isn't the most transparent industry, so I just found that information not very accessible. So I didn't know how to even get started. The second dip, the big dip, that did almost cause me to quit and even put me in hospital with burnout at one point, was that I couldn't find insurers who wanted to work with me, which is kind of important if you want to build an insurance business. So it turns out when you're a 20-something-year-old woman knocking on the door of some of the UK's biggest insurers and you're saying, "Hi, I want to start a business and sell your products. I don't have an existing book of customers. I don't have any indication that it will be a success. I've never done it before. And I have no funding or money to build it." It turns out that they all say, "No thanks." So I spent a solid 2 years traveling around the UK, taking whatever meetings I could to try and find an insurer to partner with. And that was 2 years of solid rejection and dead-end meetings. I remember being in that place really vividly. It is a horrible place to be in. You're hungry for something, you want to make it happen, you're putting in so much work, and yet there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And it takes a lot of grit to keep going through that. But it was when I was going through that I read The Dip. And Seth Godin says the dip is when successful people don't quit. That the system expects us to give up. But if we persevere through the dip, we'll have a chance. Just a chance, but a chance at achieving extraordinary results. And if you're more familiar with startup terminology, then you might have heard it be described as the trough of sorrow. Andrew Chen sums it up perfectly. Quitting, starting over, and other avoidance strategies won't keep you from hitting a difficult point again. It'll just delay the inevitable. Instead, just figure out how to work through it. And knowing that whatever it is you build, there's always going to be that dip, you can use that as a metric to determine how serious you are about something before you get too far into building it. Do you want this enough? Do you love this enough? Do you believe in this idea enough to get through the dip? So when I was starting out in insurance, I noticed that there were no blogs on the topic of like building or starting an insurance business. And I'm used to our industry where there's a blog post for everything. The second we learn about something, we're teaching others how to do it. So I knew that I really wanted to be transparent about the build process. I did that by the good old approach of putting up a landing page and collecting email addresses to notify people of launch. So by this point, I had an insurer on board. Woohoo! And we were building the tech. We were actually building the first version of the quote system. Now, I know that it feels like we've kind of reached saturation point with landing pages that ask for your email addresses, but there's a reason that internet marketers tell us to do this, and it's because email is really powerful. So insurance isn't the most engaging topic, I think we can all agree on that. But with this landing page, I was able to get more than 120 signups, and that's not a big number, but this was a great audience of people that I could involve in the build process, get feedback about things, and even invite them to beta test the first version of WithJack's quote system. My friends at Chew, which is a live streaming community for DJs, they went one step further and they made their Trello roadmap public, and they actively encouraged all of their users to contribute to it and suggest feature ideas. I think Monzo do something similar. I don't think they ask customers to contribute to it, but I think their roadmap's public. You can see what they're building and what's in the pipeline. Now, this approach is really scary. It's perfectly natural to want to hide away and only emerge when you have something pixel perfect to show people. But I personally think that this is a necessary part of building something people want. And I think that being transparent about the build process has more upsides than it does downsides. The first is that it creates a sense of community. It gets people more invested in what it is you're building if they've watched the journey, or even if they've been a part of it themselves by beta testing or suggesting features. It's how I got my first customer. In fact, several of those beta testers ended up becoming my first customers or telling their friends about WithJack, and that was really critical in getting my early traction. If you're a solo founder, you don't have a co-founder to bounce ideas off, and that can be really difficult. So opening that feedback loop up to others is the next best thing, and something that I found really valuable and continue to do. And I do think it can set you apart from the competition. Again, to use Josh Pigford as an example, Baremetrics is a SaaS app. It's a dashboard that shows you all of your Stripe metrics and whatnot. And he made his own dashboard public and used it as the demo, and that was critical in his early growth. But like I said, it can be really scary doing this. It's natural to want to hide away and only emerge when you have something perfect to show people, but it's a necessary part of building something people want. So there's a well-known quote in the startup world. Reid Hoffman says, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. Now, I wasn't actually embarrassed by the first version of With Jack. I think because of the length of time it took me to get to launch, by that point, I was just raring to go. But with that said, it was and still is far from perfect. So in an ideal world, I would have launched with a suite of insurance products. So any kind of product a freelancer would need, I would stock. A dashboard to manage your insurance. Every aspect of insurance should be digital, not just quoting and buying, but managing your policy, making changes to your account. Instant quotes and cover. It's 2018. People expect to buy insurance with just a few clicks. A referral program to maximize on early sign-ups and launch traffic, and just have a very polished customer journey from when somebody lands on the site through to completing a purchase. That is not how it looked. It still doesn't look like that. So I launched with one product, professional indemnity insurance, manual quotes. So people have to submit their details, then I go into my broker panel and send a quote to them, so there's a slight delay. It's not ideal for them, and it's not ideal for me either, because it means I'm constantly attached to my laptop. Like, the weirdest place that I've actually processed a quote and got a sale is from on top of a volcano in Spain. I made £150 from on top of a volcano. That's kind of cool, isn't it? No dashboard or referral program. And the customer journey was far from polished, so we focused on getting one thing relatively right from the start, which was the conversational interface that we used to collect the details we need to get you a quote. But there were other parts of the customer journey that at launch we hadn't even built. Like, if somebody actually wanted to buy insurance, I was sending them to Typeform to get some more information from them. So I look at this and I think, well, I should have been embarrassed, right? Like, I look at this and think, how could I launch with that? But despite the imperfections, despite the lack of features, With Jack had a really solid launch. I was making money from day one, and the reason that I think I had such a good launch was because of all the reasons that I've just spoken about. I'd involved people in the build process. I'd been transparent about my journey in insurance up until that point and the difficulties that I'd faced in getting my business off the ground. Perhaps most importantly, I'd focused on doing one thing well, the conversational interface, and it meant that other parts of the customer journey that weren't quite as polished, people were willing to overlook. And turns out that people had the same frustrations I did about insurance. We can't really talk about launching something without touching upon shipping anxiety. I think this is something that a lot of us feel when we're putting something we've built out there into the world. There is a degree of shipping anxiety. I get it even with something as simple as hitting publish on a blog post. Owen was experiencing a bit of shipping anxiety, and he asked when you should stop obsessing over adding features and launch. And the replies to this thread were really fascinating. It ranged from people who had spent time and money building pixel-perfect products only to launch and realize nobody wanted what they'd built. By the way, I've been there, I've done that. I locked myself away for 9 months and built a SaaS app, and to this day I have 0 paying customers. To people saying that you should launch with one useful feature with a list of features to build post-launch based on customer feedback. That's the route that I took with Jack, and it worked really well. To people saying that it doesn't matter when you launch, it is always going to feel incomplete. This is true. So just set a date and ship it. So what happens when you ship? Well, firstly, you will discover problems. There are certain problems that you'll only discover when what it is you've built is out there in the hands of people and they're using it. Now, I thought that the problem I was going to come up against at launch was that people wouldn't trust somebody who was new to the scene. So I wasn't a household name, I wasn't a 200-year-old insurer, and I thought I'd have problems with trust. Turns out that wasn't the case, actually. The problems that I ran into was with the price-driven buying behavior consumers have. So when I launched, I didn't have the cheapest product on the market, which is a good thing. I don't want to be the cheapest. I think Jason Fried at Basecamp said it best. I'm paraphrasing him, but he said something like, if Basecamp's success was tied to the fact that we were the cheapest software in the market, I wouldn't like that. And I feel the same way. But thanks to these characters, they've really instilled this price-driven buying behavior in people who just want to look at a table of prices, choose the cheapest, and get on their way. So this meant that I lost a ton of sales at launch. I think this was the first few weeks after launch. And as a solo founder bootstrapping, that's a lot of money to leave on the table. So I did two things. The first was, because I'd had such good launch, I was able to go to the insurer and say, look at all of these sales we're losing. And most of it was to do with price. And so they worked with me on establishing a better price point. And the second thing I do is really just try to educate people that insurance is like anything else in this world. You get what you pay for. What else happens when you ship? Truthfully, probably a whole lot of nothing. I used to expect big things from launches. I used to be like, this is it. This is the idea that's going to take off. People are going to find it really valuable. I'm going to make loads of money. And then over the years, I've learned to drastically scale my expectations back. There is no overnight success, contrary to what TechCrunch articles enjoy telling us. And I think that this is a really dangerous territory to get into. So I looked for a few examples of overnight success stories. Idea to 20,000 monthly recurring revenue in 5 months. Wow. How we got 300,000 users in 24 hours. Whoa. How I made $70,000 in 48 hours. This is a load of crap. So whilst that might be the case for them, for the vast majority of us, launches don't look like that, and it's really dangerous to compare your own launch story with others. It's something that I still do. Just recently, somebody I follow on Twitter launched a new product, and within 2 months, he tweeted about hitting 10K MRR. And I'm a year and a half into this, and I'm still not at 10K MRR. And I started questioning myself, doubting myself, like maybe I'm just not very good at this. But then I remembered this person has a huge existing audience to launch to. They had tens of thousands of people to launch to, and they'd already built a successful product in that space. So stop comparing your own launch stories to other people's. If you look at Airbnb, they had a disastrous launch. They launched with 6 listings, and from those 6 listings, only 2 of them became bookings, and one of those bookings was from Brian, the co-founder, so that doesn't even count. So that's 1 paying customer, which I actually think is pretty good. But can you imagine if they'd stopped at that point? Now, I'm not building the next Airbnb, and you're probably not building the next Airbnb. But my point is, if your launch isn't explosive, viral, dollar bills falling from the sky, that's okay. Traction takes time. You just have to keep showing up and iterating. So what we see when we look at other people's work is the finished product. We don't see its origin. We don't see how it got from point A to point B. WithJack has changed a lot in the last year and a half, and every single one of those changes has been influenced by being in the trenches with my customers and speaking to them. Like I said, I launched with just 1 product, professional indemnity insurance. And then 6 months later, we rolled out 2 new products, contents and public liability. And that wasn't based on a hunch. That wasn't a lucky guess. That was monitoring what customers were coming to me and asking for, or why I was losing sales. In April, we redesigned the risk question. So this was part of the customer journey that was really confusing people. Was this the final step in the process? How do they pay? So we redesigned the risk questions to address those common confusions, and the conversion rate went up by 14%. And then in June, we added more support in for other professions. So 70% of WithJack's customers are made up of designers, developers, consultants, and graphic designers. But I started to see a lot of photographers using the service, a lot of internet marketers. So we built support for them into it. And I feel like I've been saying this for ages, but you have no idea how slowly insurance moves. Coming soon, we are currently building this, instant quotes and account creation so you can manage and make changes to your account. Now, I could have waited to launch with all of that stuff, but not only would it have massively delayed my launch, it would have been total guesswork. Like, how would I ever know that we'd get internet marketers using the service? How did I ever know that freelancers would be so hot for public liability? I didn't. Instead, I had my customers tell me what they wanted. Customer development is a bit of a buzzword, but for me it just means testing your assumptions by speaking to your customers. Alex from Groove says that customer development's been the most valuable thing that they've done when it comes to moving their product forward, and it's been very valuable in helping me build on and improve WithJack. So last year, I applied to join an accelerator. I wasn't successful with it, but I did learn a ton. And the very first thing they instilled in all of us was being diligent about doing customer development. In fact, the very first task they gave me after the accelerator was to read the Mum Test, which is a book that teaches you how to talk to customers. Because you think you know why your customers are using what it is you've built. You're probably wrong. Like, I thought that too. I was like, I've built this thing from scratch and I'm manually processing quotes. So I've had hundreds of customer conversations. I know why people are using WithJack. I was wrong. So I've tested quite a few assumptions, but I'll just share a couple of them with you now. The first was that I figured I could improve sign-ups if I offered customer rewards. So insurance is this intangible thing. We pay for it. We hopefully never have to use it. And because of that, it means a lot of freelancers actually won't buy it, which pains me because I see all of the horrible situations. So I thought we could increase signups if we offered discounts to relevant software or even freebies in some case. Turns out I was wrong about that. In fact, the exact words that came up in customer development was that they devalued the brand and they cheapened the service. So I stopped wasting my time chasing down partners, and I removed that from the homepage and gave that screen real estate to something that did provide value. And the second assumption I tested was that freelancers buy insurance because it's contractually required. Obviously, knowing why your customers are paying for your product helps you market it better. It turns out I was wrong about this too, that there are in fact a lot of emotional factors that go into purchasing insurance. Again, this is their words, not mine, such as job security, knowing they can get back to work quickly if something bad happens. Peace of mind, knowing they can defend themselves against legal action, and that their customers are dealing with a professionally insured business. So my point is, you think you know why people are using what it is you've built. There's a good chance you're wrong, so be sure to always test those assumptions. This is a tool that I use for all of my customer development stuff. It's built by a couple of Foursquare people, and I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just really find this useful, and it's a great tool. It's called Iterate. So I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't resonate with that term. To me, it means somebody who remortgages their house and takes a punt on a crazy idea, and I'm definitely not doing that. But I liked this quote I came across. Real entrepreneurship is launching something that solves a problem for people and then getting paid to do it again. It's that simple. But you do have to be prepared to show up every day for the first few years, putting in a maximum amount of work and not always seeing that return on investment. Just recently, a year and a half in with Jack's, had some really exciting growth. Of more than doubled my monthly sign-ups, but that's after a year and a half of showing up every day and making these small changes that on a day-to-day basis don't really amount to much, that after the course of a year are starting to make a big difference. So let's just tie everything up based on what stage you're at. If you're at the idea stage, I really want to encourage you to pick one idea and double down on it and give it the resources that it needs to become a great project. If you're at the build stage, forecast your misery. There's going to be the dip, so use it as a metric to determine how serious you are about something before you get too far into it. If you're at the launch stage, you're going to be feeling some shipping anxiety, but just focus on building one feature, set a date, and ship it. And if you're at the post-launch stage, make sure you're doing your customer development. You should be doing that at every stage, but at this point, you should hopefully have a few paying customers. So always test your assumptions. I really like this quote, which is why I wanted to finish on it, by Daniel. You can do whatever you want when you realize one secret. Everything big starts small. Thank you